Howdy there, everybody in YouTube land. I'm proud to present a video made in my bedroom and 3 Macintoshes. No, not really. Well, sort of. So, what this video actually is really about is how to replace a CRT in a compact Macintosh. Some people may not know how to do this. Some people do know how to do this, but they realize that there are incompatibilities in these plugs compared to other machines. So this video is actually about how to transplant a CRT, any CRT from any generation on these series of computers. So for example, I can use a Macintosh Plus CRT in my SE30 or in my Classic or whatever. But if you remember past videos, I made one on this Macintosh Classic, okay? And if you remember correctly, the Classic had a fairly severe burn-in on the screen, and the Classic also had a weak CRT and it wouldn't focus correctly, okay? Well, my SE30 works fairly decently, but it too also has a burned-in screen of Microsoft Word, and you can see the little window open in the background, but it still works good, okay? This Macintosh Plus is a parts unit, and the reason why is the analog board is bad. It too has also a burned-in screen, but not nearly as severe as these two, okay? This guy is going to get scrapped out and thrown away because the logic board was sold already and the analog board is shot, okay? I could have fixed that analog board up, but I've already got a Plus, and there's this huge crack in the case from shipping damage or whatever. It's not worth it. It really isn't. So these are a dime a dozen. And this CRT was a spare that was shipped to me that I purchased. It came with the yoke connector and all that fun stuff. And this one has almost no burn-in whatsoever. So I will use this tube in my SE30 because that is my primary keeper. So I'm going to use that tube in there, and I'm going to use this tube, I'm going to use this tube in the Classic, and I'm going to sell the Classic because I don't need it. And this tube that's already in here, which is still a good tube, it's just burned in, I will keep it as a spare, just in case, because these CRTs aren't being made anymore, and even though they're plentiful now, people that collect vintage televisions know all too often that these CRTs are hard to find, especially the old 40s and 50s televisions. So, let's talk a little bit about the anatomy of the CRT here. We have the electron gun, of course. Everybody knows that. But this is the deflection yoke. Okay? These guys here, which are marked, these are your centering magnets, your centering rings. And what these are designed to do is exactly that, is center the picture. So if it's off center to one side or the other, you would rotate these around to get it exactly right. Okay? But there could be some residual magnetization in the gun which can distort the edges of the picture. And that's what these little magnets here are for. These magnets are designed to be twisted and turned to keep the picture perfectly straight. So you would move these around to try to bend down any little curves or distortions on the picture itself. Okay? Assuming your electronics are good. Now, it won't really adjust out electronic faults, but the problem is sometimes these electron guns can get a little bit magnetized. So, aside from degaussing this gun, which you could do that, but it won't entirely fix the problem, or throw the distortion out even more in the opposite direction, so you would rotate these magnets around. Okay? So, this video tutorial is basically gonna explain how to replace the CRT. If I'm not mistaken, I believe this connector is the same one that's already in here. So this should be just drop and go. So we'll be able to take this CRT and put it straight in here. Okay. Now, this one, not so much. This CRT is not going to go very well in there. Okay. So, because this deflection yoke is different. And most people think that because the yoke is different, it won't go in there. Well, that's not true, because all you'd have to do is take this screw out or loosen it, which will allow this to slide around, and then just take the yoke and carefully go crack and twist it, and it will work its way up, and you can pull it completely off. So then you take the original yoke and put it on your new CRT, fit it in there, and snug this bolt, but don't tighten it, because you're going to need to adjust the yoke back and forth this way to center, to straighten your picture. Otherwise it's going to look warped. Once it's straightened, then you can adjust these centering rings and magnets accordingly to get your picture straight and perfect, if required. Sometimes it's not required, but in some cases it is. So with the magic of video editing, you don't have to wait and see me take these machines apart. So be back in a second. Oh, before I go any further, in case you're not aware, there are 4 screws in a typical compact Macintosh. There's 2 hidden up inside of the handle and 2 back here. So what you're going to need is a long screwdriver, or you can buy the tool on eBay that's designed for this purpose. It is a T15, which what I have is a T10. It's a little small, but it does fit in there. It is a T15 Torx long blade screwdriver. So all we got to do is just loosen up the screws, and that should be it. Now this screwdriver I don't think is magnetized, so it's not really going to help me a whole lot getting them out. But yeah, it's not magnetized. But carefully set the screws out and not lose them like I'm getting ready to do. And I'm very good at losing screws, so yeah. So I'll go ahead and finish this and get the CRT prepped for removal. Okay, now that the back is actually off the machine, what we have to do now is very carefully remove anything out of the way that is going to be in the way. So first we have 2 screws here, and we have 2 more hidden underneath the analog board. So the analog board will have to be removed. So to prep the analog board for removal, we need to go ahead and disconnect our cables to the hard disk drive, and we need to disconnect our motherboard cables. When you do this, be very careful. Well, if you're changing the CRT, it doesn't matter, because a lot of people, when you pull on these cables, let's move that out of the way, it's in my way. When you pull on these cables, if you're not careful and you go to pull on it, you might force it too hard, and every action has the equal opposite reaction. You'll run your hand directly here, and you'll snap off the neck of the CRT, and then it's game over. But because we're replacing the CRT, that doesn't matter. But I've done this long enough that it's relatively straightforward. So the next thing we need to do is we need to carefully remove the neck board from the CRT, like such. That will expose the pins and the vacuum seal of the CRT itself. So the next thing we need to do is we need to verify our yoke connection. In this case, I believe it is the same. So what we do is we verify the yoke connection versus the CRT that you're going to replace it with. Okay, as you can see, the yoke is identical in this respect, so we shouldn't need to do any modifications. Now, I believe with this guy to this guy, we have to, so I will get that in the video. But we need to remove these 2 screws and the grounding strap, and then we need to remove all the screws to the analog board that hold it into place. So we will go ahead and do that. We remove our shield to the motherboard, logic board. We go ahead and we slide out our logic board and get it out of the way so we don't destroy anything important. So now our logic board, forget about the speaker wire. If your logic board hasn't been recapped yet, I highly recommend that you do so, because these things are notorious for leaking capacitors. Now luckily I recapped mine a long time ago, so There's no damage from leaking capacitors whatsoever, except for maybe one little spot here, but I might clean this board off just because. But the typical damage with UE8 and all that is not there because I recapped this thing way back in the early 2000s when I knew this was going to be a problem. And you could buy those motherboards for $5 a piece. Can't do that now. Not at all. So, alright, without further ado, let's go ahead. Oh, one more thing. This guy, there's a lot of concern with this anode lead here, okay? I'm safe to touching it because I'm not afraid of nothing. These flybacks on the newer machines, I don't know about the old ones, but the newer machines have an internal bleed off resistor. So as long as it's off for at least an hour or so, the high voltage drains down and you don't have to worry about it. So what we need to do is there's two tabs, kind of like a claw, and what you want to do is you want to squeeze it and push down. You hear it pop out and then push over, and that releases the two clip tabs. So now that the anode lead is disconnected, we can go ahead and remove the analog board. Alright, now that the screws are out, two here, your grounding screw here, and then your two here and here. This should just lift, swing out of the way, and you should be able to pull it up and out very much like this. Be very careful though, unlike I'm doing. Try not to lose this little metal grounding strap here, but the analog board is safely out of the way. Just watch this wire. You can undo the screw first if you wish. So, and there we go. Now, here's another thing. And I haven't done this yet, so I'm not a good example of this, but now that you have this analog board out of the way, it is a good idea to go ahead and recap it. This guy here is a big one, but I don't just change the one. What I do is I suck up and remove all the solder here, change all of these capacitors one by one, here, all of them. There's even one hiding down in there. Okay, change them all. Suck all the solder off the flyback and the yoke connector and resolder them in place, and touch up any other bad solder joints there might be, because it's a very common problem to get shaky picture, lose deflection and stuff like that. Also, this contains the Aztec power supply, and the Aztec power supplies also have weird little issues here and there. But I digress. This exposes all 4 screws of the CRT. So now it is safe to take every screw out of the CRT, like such. I got these 2 out. Now, I got to take this 2 out. Nope, that one didn't stick to my screwdriver. Of course not. Alright, all 4 screws are now out of the CRT. So we should be able to take the CRT and carefully lift it up and out of the way. And there you have it. The CRT is now removed. That will be saved as a spare, and this guy will be put into position. Alright. And now there is a little bit of play here, so you want to line this up as best as you possibly can. And once you have it lined up to your liking, don't forget this ground wire. Put it here, screw it all into place, and then you're done. Follow the exact same steps in the reverse order, which I'm not going to show you that. So with the magic of video editing, I'm going to go ahead and put this thing back together. And that is it. 2 things. One, if you have a problem getting this back in here, make sure that you're getting in these little grooves, because there's 2 little slots here that they got to go in, and make sure everything's lined up and screwed in. I haven't done that yet, but there's one thing I want to show you. Okay, now I don't want to blatantly ignore any safety concerns, because in the case of this computer you're okay, but if you're working on something else with a CRT, I can't guarantee the design. So if you don't feel safe, just take you a little flat blade screwdriver, wrap a wire around it, and then ground it to the DAG or one of these ground points, slip it under the anode lead and pop it and make sure there's no charge in it. Okay, just for safety's sake. But in the case of these machines, I already know, I've done this many times, and I know we're not going to have any problems. So the one thing I'm going to show you is how to put these back on. What you want to do is take two hands, it's hard to do this with one, and bend the cup up so you can see the two leads, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to slide one pin in the anode cup and then push it, and then you'll see the other one go in the hole and then click into place, and now it's locked in there. Just let go. Now this should snap back into place, but because it's old rubber, it's not wanting to do that very well. And then good, we have a good solid anode connection. So now you don't need to worry about that popping off and arcing and destroying all your good hard work, because it will, or your life. So I'm going to go ahead and finish putting this back together and we're going to try it out. All done. So now let's go ahead and give her a shot. Oops, hang on. And make sure it's in these little grooves here and here. Alright. Yeah, got a chime. Let's see, what do we got? What do we got? What do we got? Hey, we got a picture. Alright. All good. Let's see how bright that goes. Wow, there we go. That makes all the difference in the world. Now, several things to note here. See, the CRT is off center, okay? This is where those centering magnets will come into place, okay? Other things, height and width adjustment. Anytime you change a CRT like this, there's several connections in the back here that are used to set the picture. There's the focus point, there's the cutoff, which is, you don't want retrace lines, that kind of stuff. And then there's the horizontal width and the vertical height, okay? Relatively simple. With a color CRT, you're going to have a lot more than that, but you don't want to mess with the color CRT. So, if the yoke is twisted, like if the picture was off-centered, since I didn't change the yoke, I didn't have to worry about that, but let's say if the picture was off-centered, well, not off-center, but twisted this way, I would carefully, with that screw loose, get in there and twist this yoke and watch the screen. You want to be careful, because the high voltage lead that's now energized and is very dangerous because it is energized runs right there. Okay, so the insulation on that wire is pretty good because it's next to this ground wire, but you don't want to chance it. Trust me, I learned that lesson a few times. So yeah, that's very cool. So perfect. I mean, that is way brighter than I can imagine. And it works really well. So, first things first, with the brightness all the way up. Hold on, let me turn the light off. Oh, looks like I can't turn the light off. Welcome to Samsung phones. With the brightness all the way up, what we need to do is check the focus, okay? And the focus is off. So what we want to do is we want to get in here with an adjustment tool, which I don't have on hand, but this is the closest thing I have. Get an adjustment tool, and what we're going to do is we're going to set the brightness, or the focus. Okay, now see, it's really blurry. Turn it the other way, it clears up. So let me turn the autofocus back on the camera. That would help, now wouldn't it? So see how it's clear, and then now it's really blurry. So what we want to do is we want to adjust the focus to the best point, which is, that's going to be it right there. And there we go. That is nice and sharp. Alright, that one's taken care of. Next thing, okay, we want to set the width, which I have to have a special tool for that, so I can't do that right now, but I can set the vertical height, okay? So we'll take the vertical height and we'll adjust that. Let's see what kind of tool I need for that. Crap, that's a flathead too. Okay, I won't adjust the vertical height right now, but you get my point. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to adjust it, length and height, to get everything centered. And then the next thing we do is we get to these centering rings right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to pop these centering rings loose. Alright, now the centering rings are loose. So now you're going to see how this works. Okay, see that? That's how the centering ring works. So what we're going to do is we're going to center this picture the best way we can. Okay, it's too far low. So then we grab the second ring and we move it around and we bring it up. It's a constant adjustment. It's a finesse. And actually that looks pretty good right there. So now, let's see if the picture is centered. And actually, you know what? I'm going to leave it just like that. Just like the way it is. That looks really good. So, there we go. That's it. That was simple now, wasn't it? So that is how you change a CRT as a direct replacement. Now it's going to get a little more interesting. Now we're going to do a CRT that is not a direct replacement. So, stand by. Alright, here's the Macintosh Classic all apart now. I went ahead and removed the donor CRT, and as you can see, it is slightly different compared to what's going on over there. But the plugs are the same. However, look at the Macintosh Classic. That yoke is very similar to this one, but the plug is completely different. So it's a different setup. Now, let's just go ahead and do a before shot before I go and take this thing out of commission. So, that's what it looks like before. Kind of dim, not very bright. This one has all of its controls back here. So I gotta figure out which one's which. I think it's labeled on the back of the case if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, there's that. Alright, everything looks good there. And before you ask, yes, I refurbish all of my hard drives. That hard drive in there is a Quantum, and the reason why it still works is because I fixed it. So, it was fun. But I took care of that problem well in advance before the actual head crash occurred. But that's a different discussion for another time. For now, we'll just do an initial boot up of the machine before I change out the CRT. So, you get to see on video what you have to do to change the yoke because the yokes are different. So, while that thing is booting up, we're going to go ahead and take this yoke. This yoke is a little different, but it's still the same concept. What we do is we have a screw right here, and what we want to do is we want to crack it loose. You hear crack, okay? Take it loose, not all the way, just enough to where this little thing is completely loose. So then what we need to do, because I got to clean this CRT anyway, is we're going to take it with a little bit of downward force. We're just going to go crack. See? Now it's loose. And this should lift straight up. And that's it. That's all you got to do. That simple. Now pay attention to the orientation of these because they are different. So if you flip it this way, it's going to be rotated upside down. So you'll see what I mean. So there it is. Initial boot before I change the CRT. So power down. And we'll change out the CRT. Now to take the Macintosh Classic apart, it's a little bit different. You got to unplug all the stuff here. Take the yoke board off like before. Unplug your power connection and all that fun stuff. And then there's two screws here. There's one there and there's another one here that has to come off. And then that should free up the board. We'll set them right out of the way. Make sure there's no other screws. I don't see any. So, in theory, it should just slide out like that. Or maybe not. Oh, that's in the way, that's in the way. Where's my hold up? Oh, the fan. That's right, fan connector. Whoops. Little fan connector right there. As soon as I can get to it. Unplug the fan. I forgot the fan is way up there. And that's it. Done. This guy's been recapped already, so I don't have to worry about that. That was in a previous video. So that exposes the CRT screws. So we'll go ahead and take them out, and that should loosen our CRT. Same thing here. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and do that now. This is the original yoke. Note its orientation, okay? The connector, the wires coming out of the yoke are on this side of the CRT, opposite of the anode cap. So keep that in mind. So what we're going to do is we're going to loosen that out. Again, don't take it all the way out, just enough to where it's loose. Push, twist, crack. And then there she is. and this guy will go on there, on that. And make sure when you put the yoke on, push it all the way up. Otherwise, the picture won't deflect all the way out. So keep it as centered as possible. And then we'll do fine adjustments once I get the CRT completely out of the chassis here. And this CRT is now out. Where does this one go? Well, this one goes into the trash because I'm not keeping that one. It is no good whatsoever. None. I mean, that's bad. So, goodbye, little lonely CRT. And welcome, little newly CRT. And that is grand. And actually, before I do this, I need to clean that one. So, give me one moment. Also, make sure that when you put the yoke on, that the screw head is this way and not this way, because the analog board sits here, so it'll be a little bit more difficult to get to. If it's facing the wrong direction, then loosen this ring off and rotate it around so it's facing the right direction. Otherwise, you're going to give yourself a really hard time and a lot of heartache that you don't need. Also, we want to take this screw and screw it all the way in snug, but not tight. Snug enough to where this is hard to turn, but you can still rotate it ever so slightly. That way you can make the fine, minute adjustments. And also, when you're done, you can tighten it a little bit, but don't over tighten it, because you don't want to snap this neck off. Because if you do that, then, well, all your efforts are wasted. So a little bit of food for thought. Alright, now that the new CRT is installed, we'll go ahead and give her a shot to compare the results. Again, watch this high voltage lead, because you got to get your fingers in here and rotate this around. So we'll go ahead and give her a shot. Hey, no sparks. That's a good thing. Let's see how she came out, the picture wise. Oh, here she comes. About the same brightness, but it's definitely a lot more clear. Oh yeah, it is definitely a lot clearer. I mean, that is, as soon as the autofocus kicks in. Yeah, that's a lot more clear. So, but as you can see, the picture is definitely tilted. So what we're going to do here is we're going to grab the very top of the magnet, and we're going to move this yoke until that picture is straight. Nope, too far. Too far. And it's going to take some finesse. Alright. That picture is definitely straight. Now that we have the picture straight, we could tighten that screw down, but be careful, don't put too much pressure on the screw when tightening it down, because you'll move the yoke again. Also, you see the sides, how they're kind of they're bowed out a little bit, and there's little peaks here and there. Well, that's what these little magnets are actually for. It's for adjusting those. So if you don't like these little corner peaks and stuff like that, I don't personally care. But if they're troublesome for you, or if you're a little fussy about it, well, that's why these are here. So you can adjust those, turn them around, and then glue them back into place when you get everything lined up the way you want. But that is definitely looking a lot better. Much better. Alright, that's it. That concludes this video. So thank you for watching, and if you have a comment, please feel free to leave one.